Hey guys, Sure Shot Midget here. So got another V12 to make a video on. So this was a complete install by me, of course. This was a friend's gun that he bought roughly $50 because I think he bought two guns for $100. So he probably spent a little bit more on this because the other gun's not quite worth 50. Maybe worth 50. So between 50 and 70 is the way you could look at it. It is a Classic Army plastic body. It is the Sportline, of course, because the plastic body, and it has like the plastic bushings on the gearbox and stuff like that. Now the gearbox actually shot really good. It shot about 23 rounds a second with an 11-1 LiPo, which is pretty good out of the box. They have really kind of speedy motors in there. I don't know, maybe 35K is what they're probably considered. The spring was pretty weak as well. I'm not sure what it was chronoing as far as feet per second. Probably 350. I think they have a pretty weak spring in there. Just because it's a kind of a lower end gun. So it is a plastic body. It's a pretty light gun. But yeah, he dropped the V12 in it. It is his first HPA gun. He was very hesitant on getting HPA for a while, and he's seen me and my friends have it, and just the performance that it can give. He also got a Classic Army, what do they call it, EC2? Maybe, I think EC1, I think is what it is. It's an all-metal M4. It's got the built-in basic MOSFET. Is not the one with the micro switch like the Aries MOSFET's not one of those, but just the basic MOSFET. And he's getting good performance out of that. He was getting about 400 feet per second. It's kind of a shorter gun, so I recommended him to lower the spring in that. It's got a quick change spring system, so I can put a CQB spring in there, and he can use that indoors for 350 and below, and then he can use this outdoors for 400 feet per second scenarios. So I think that'd be good for him to have one indoor gun, one outdoor gun. He can still use the AEG outdoors if he wants, but it'll just be lower feet per second. He also has a bolt action sniper that he likes to use a lot. So let's just start from the back and go to the front. We have the Classic Army crane stock with the JST LiPo in here. I believe he plans on putting a LE stock on here. I don't know why. I prefer crane stocks, but I think he likes the LE stock look, which is interesting because most people don't like the LE stock. I don't. But that's totally up to him. That JST LiPo will just fit right in that buffer tube, so no issues there at all. This pistol grip here did not come with the gun. This actually came with the lower receiver that I got the V12 in. It was just in a G&G lower. So if he wants to keep this grip, he can. It feels comfortable regardless because it's kind of universal. There's no notch, so it's the same spec on both sides, left or right, which is cool. Some of the ergo grips will be uncomfortable on one side and comfortable on the other. This one is the same on both sides, so you can keep this if he wants. I do have the basic one I can throw on here. I did have to use a Polar Star valve because the V12 valves are absolutely garbage and they leak. So the first thing you need to do when you get a V12, any V12, ditch the valve. It is trash. Every single one of them I have seen leak. Almost every single one. There have been occasionally ones that I see that work fine when I work on customers' guns, but I have tons of them in my basement. I probably have 10 of them, and every time I try them, they just leak, and so I ditch them, and that's why I have a collection of them. The body is plastic, like I said. It does have the Armlight trademarks. It is black. It's not like the older versions. There were really old versions of these that had the gray body that were Armlight trademarked, and I had one of those. Those were like 10 years old. Those are really old guns. These aren't as old. In fact, these are probably current production, but it does say Armlight M15A4 is what they call it. Plastic body, as far as durability, it's pretty decent. There's no wobble on the body, which is the good thing. Very solid, and all the trademarks are white, which is pretty cool. Charging handle here, got the hop up in there. I'll get to that later. The rail system here is just a standard RAS. The whole barrel system wobbled on this thing like crazy. So I took the rail off, I had to take the sling mount off, and I tightened the screw underneath the front sight here, gas block. It's pretty much the same thing. And I had to tighten that because the whole barrel was wobbling. But I eliminated the whole barrel wobble. There's still a little bit of looseness on the rail, just a little bit of tilt, but that's to be expected on these rails, honestly. So it's got that quad rail and a vertical grip on it, KAC style. 14.5-inch barrel, so standard length. And then we have what I think it was an 8 or 10-inch suppressor. I forget what brand it is. It says lightweight. Oh, King Arms. and it is foam filled. So this is foam filled from tip to tip. It is counterclockwise and clockwise, which is nice. I love it when suppressors are like that because you can really throw it on any gun. And it is, like I said, foam filled. So this gun is very, very quiet. Hop-up wise, it is using the stock hop-up. The reason why I use the stock hop-up, one, budget. If you want to pro in, that's $30 more. But the wheel is very, very tight. This wheel does not move unless you want it to, which is perfect. It does have a Crytac bucking because the stock bucking was clogging BBs and creating some feeding issues. So Crytac bucking feeds perfect and shoots very well. And the stock inner barrel, which is like an aluminum 603 or 605, probably 605. It's not that good, and it stops like right here, of course. So it suppresses it fine. Getting pretty good performance. I'd say 200 feet with .3 is easy. So that's that. I also forgot to mention the ACOG. It doesn't have a battery in it, so I don't know if it works. So I'll have him test that. I think it's like a AAA on the inside, so I'll let him know that there was no battery in there and that he should test it. It isn't magnified, but it's there for looks pretty much. As far as the upgrades on the engine, of course, like I said, I had to replace that valve. It is a old version of the V12, so it's the original system, which is awesome, easier to tune, if you ask me. So original system, it's got a short trigger pull mod done. It's got a red nozzle, which you're not going to be able to see, I doubt, up in there. Red nozzle. It's got a stock poppet valve, no shim. It's got a banjo fitting, which is the S2 banjo. It's basically a QEV. I prefer the QEVs because they're easier to install. You don't have to modify the shell like you do with the banjos. Plus, I just overall like the QEVs. But the banjos are the only thing that are in stock. But it does effectively do the same thing. Lowers the air volume, basically, so it saves that air, basically. Other than that, it's stock solenoids, of course, stock poppet, like I said. He could use a low flow to get better efficiency, but then he'll have to rise the PSI to get 400, and it's just not worth it to spend that $40 roughly on a poppet. It's just better to keep it where it's at now, to be honest. And as far as budget on this, I think he spent about $500 on the whole setup. So he got the gun, he got the V12 with the upgrades, the suppressor, he got a Redline SFR with a line, and he got a 62 cubic inch Gorilla tank, 3000 PSI, of course, LiPo charger, and then the LiPo for this. And he also got 2 Lonex flash mags. All of that for about $500, which is very good. So a full HPA setup for $500. As far as settings, like I said, 30 rounds a second, so lower rate of fire. I did tell him if he wants, he can do 40 rounds a second at 3-round burst, which is a very quick burst. It does feed perfectly and shoot very, very well at that. So if he wants to do that, he's cool with that. He did say he just would rather do the 30 rounds a second full auto, which makes sense for a full auto game. He can just flip it to full auto and not worry about doing a burst. So that's up to him. It's closable, you know, all the good settings that I do. The dwell is up a little bit, so it's going to be using a little bit more air, but that's because it's using heavier BBs. When you use heavier BBs, you want the air going down the barrel for a longer period of time so that the BB can get out of the barrel before the nozzle moves or the poppet stops pushing air on it. Hope that makes sense. It just gives it more consistency. This gun's very, very consistent and gives it more FPS and some good joules, and it makes it sound a little bit better. So it feels freaking great out here. It really does. It's not too hot. It's maybe a little breezy here, but it's only 11 in the morning, so it'll probably get hotter, but the sun is straight out. Like, there's no clouds covering it whatsoever. It's so clear skies today, and it just feels so good out here. I'm standing in the sun, and honestly, I don't feel hot at all. Like, I just feel great. So that's a plus. I don't know the temperature out here, probably 75 maybe, but it just feels great. There's no humidity in the air, so we're chilling out here. So I got a BAMP full of .2s for the chrono. Obviously overhopping with a .2. Got the chrono set for .2s. Again, we're shooting for 400, 403, 399, 396, 399, 395, 397, 398, 396, 399, 397, 397, 398, 398, 399, 398. So again, very, very consistent. That is 1.47 joules with a 0.2, so that's the limit. I wouldn't suggest going any higher, trying to get a little bit more out of it. This is good where it's at. Let's do full auto. 28.83, 402 FPS. So again, 28.83 rounds a second. Basically 29. It's set for 30, but the V12 shoot a little bit lower than what they're set at. So mag's totally empty. Feed's great, especially with 0.2s, 2.5s, mid-capsule feed all the way. With 3s, you're going to get a little bit of feeding issues. But the owner, like I said, has 2 Lonex flash mags, and he also has like 2 standard high caps. So I got a high cap full of 0.3s. Let's go ahead and put it through the chrono, and so I can tell you exactly what joules it's shooting. 350 FPS, 348, 345. 349, 351. Trigger response is obviously there. Definitely 200 feet. Definitely. Absolutely. Absolutely 200 feet with 0.3s, and I'm sure he could hit people further. And then full auto is perfect. I can literally hit it every single time. And we're out. So yeah, basically a recap, we're running about 345 feet per second with a 0.3, which is about 1.6, was it 1.68, so almost 1.7 with a 0.3, which is 400 FPS with a 0.2, and 30 rounds a second. What about 1400 PSI? So we went through 800 PSI and about 1,000 cycles. Pretty incredible if you ask me. Again, this is a bigger tank. This is an 88 cubic inch. He's going to be using a 62. But to put this in perspective, shooting 1,000 rounds off, this gun, like I just did, would probably be about 1,200 PSI on a 62. So still pretty dang good. So he's probably going to be able to get 3,000 PSI on a, or 3,000 shots, roughly 2,500, 3,000 on a full 62 cubic inch tank. If you have any questions for me or anything, let me know. I don't think I have anything else to say about this gun. It just works. It works. He's definitely going to be super excited to play with this because it is a fantastic gun.